Have you ever noticed how quiet the world gets right after the pleasure ends? The moment after the kiss, after the scroll, after the cake. There's a pause, a silence, not outside, but inside you. We spend our lives chasing that spark, the soft tingling of ASMR, the smell of rain on warm concrete, the thrill of touch, a sunset that almost makes you cry. But the strange thing about pleasure is, the more we chase it, the further it seems to drift. It's everywhere. Yet somehow, it's never quite enough. And here's the question I want to ask. Is pleasure what we're really looking for? Or is it just a shadow of something deeper? Today we'll explore the beauty and the trap of pleasure, why the brain craves it, what the ancient thinkers believed about it, why pleasure and pain are more connected than we've been told, and how, maybe, what we truly want isn't pleasure at all, but peace, meaning, a kind of happiness that doesn't vanish when the lights go out. Stay with me. This isn't just about the pleasures we love. It's about the emptiness we sometimes feel right after. And what that emptiness is really trying to tell us. What is pleasure? A spark in the brain? A ripple through the body? Or something more ancient? Something our ancestors once knew not to chase too blindly? We feel it in the smallest things, a soft whisper, the smell of rain hitting dry earth, sunlight warming closed eyes. In that moment, everything pauses, and we say, this is good. But pleasure is tricky. It fades quickly, like a dream you can't hold on to. And the more we try to catch it, the more it seems to slip away. Still, we keep reaching for it. The biology of pleasure. Pleasure begins in the brain. At the center of it all is a tiny chemical called dopamine, the brain's way of saying, that felt good, let's do it again. But dopamine doesn't just light up when we get the thing. It fires before, in the anticipation, the craving, the build-up, that moment when your phone buzzes and your heart skips, when you smell something cooking and your mouth waters, when your fingers hover over the buy now button, that's dopamine. It's not the satisfaction, it's the promise of it. Our brains evolved this way for survival. We needed motivation to seek food, warmth, connection, even love. Pleasure was nature's reward for effort, a gentle nudge forward. But in the modern world, the system gets hijacked. We now live in a constant storm of easy rewards, likes, sugar, porn, endless scrolling, binge shows. Our brains haven't caught up. They react as if every ping or pleasure is life or death important. And here's the twist. The more we feed the system, the less sensitive it becomes. The cake that once felt like heaven becomes just okay. The thrill of a new message fades after the 100th scroll. We need more and faster to feel the same. This is called hedonic adaptation, the brain's ability to adjust, to numb, to move the goalpost. That's why chasing pleasure can quietly turn into running on a treadmill. More effort, less satisfaction, more input, but emptier results. Pleasure is still beautiful. It's not the villain. But the brain treats it like a spark, not a flame. And a life built only on sparks rarely stays warm for long. So maybe the question isn't, how do I get more pleasure? Maybe it's, how do I let it land before I lose it? Or, what's underneath the craving? Because the craving isn't just for pleasure, it's for something deeper, something that lasts. Sensory pleasures. Some pleasures are so small, so quiet, they almost slip by unnoticed, like the sound of leaves whispering in the wind, the weight of a warm blanket on a tired body, the way the sky turns gold just before the sun disappears, or the smell of rain after a long, dry day, that earthy scent that somehow smells like home. These are the pleasures that don't shout. They don't demand. They simply arrive. And if you're paying attention, they remind you that being alive can feel like grace. There's the way music can touch a part of you you didn't know was aching. One note, one lyric, and suddenly you remember something you thought you'd forgotten. There's the softness of skin against skin, a lover's hand brushing your back, a hug that lingers just a second longer than expected. Not about lust, not about need, just presence, the quiet joy of being held and being seen. Then there's nature, how it gives without asking anything in return. A forest trail, the cold shock of river water, the sun on your face. In those moments, you don't need words. You just are. These pleasures don't cost anything. They don't depend on status or screens. They ask only that you slow down long enough to notice them. But often, we don't. We rush past them, always chasing something bigger, something louder, something better. Yet these are the moments that return to us in stillness. The smell of your mother's cooking, the feeling of sand under your feet, the laughter that caught you off guard and made you forget your sadness, even if just for a second. And maybe, just maybe, it's these small, tender pleasures that keep us going. Not the highs we chase, but the soft, steady reminders that life still has beauty in it. We're taught to crave fireworks, but maybe what we truly long for is candlelight, something that stays. And if we let ourselves feel these pleasures fully, not grasp at them, not escape into them, but just be with them, maybe they become something more than a moment. Maybe they become a kind of prayer, a quiet yes to life. Ancient perspectives. Long before algorithms, advertisements, and neon lights, human beings still sought pleasure. They watched the stars, drank wine by firelight, danced until they forgot their names. They knew what we know, that pleasure can feel like a doorway, like something holy. But they also knew pleasure was powerful, and anything powerful must be respected. In ancient Greece, there was Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, and madness. He represented the wild, untamed joy that could lift a person to the heavens or tear them apart. The Greeks honored him with festivals and music, but they feared him too, because pleasure without restraint could turn divine into dangerous. In India, pleasure was seen differently. The Kama Sutra wasn't just a book about sex. It was about beauty, art, affection, and living well. Karma was one of the 4 goals of life, but always in balance with duty, dharma, and spiritual liberation, moksha. Pleasure wasn't wrong, but it wasn't everything. The Buddha, once a prince surrounded by every luxury, abandoned it all when he realized that pleasure did not end suffering. He didn't reject joy. He just knew that clinging to it leads to pain. Instead, he taught presence, balance, simplicity, joy without attachment. Even Epicurus, often misunderstood as a champion of indulgence, believed in a very quiet kind of pleasure found in friendship, peace, and a simple life. His warning was clear. Pleasure that costs your health, your peace, your soul, isn't pleasure. It's a trap. So many of these ancient voices, from temples, forests, caves, and colosseums, whisper the same truth. Pleasure is sacred, but it must be chosen wisely, sipped, not swallowed, received, not chased. Because when we chase pleasure blindly, we often end up more empty than before. But when we receive it, with presence, with gratitude, it becomes something different, not a craving, but a gift. Maybe the wisdom of the past isn't to deny pleasure, but to slow down enough to know which kind of pleasure you're actually tasting. Is it nourishing you? Or is it numbing you? There's a difference, and once you feel it, you can never forget it. Pleasure is fragile. Pleasure is beautiful, but it doesn't last. That's the hardest part. The smile fades, the laughter echoes, then vanishes. The taste, the touch, the thrill, they rise, then fall. Always. And we're left in the silence after. At first we don't notice. The cake is sweet. The joke is funny. The kiss is electric. But then something strange happens. The second slice isn't as good. The next episode doesn't feel the same. The high begins to flatten. Our brains adapt, quickly, constantly. What once delighted becomes familiar, then expected, then dull. This is called hedonic adaptation. The quiet turning of the mind's volume knob. It numbs what used to thrill us, not because we're broken, but because our brains were designed for survival, not satisfaction. And so we chase more flavor, more noise, more attention. We reach for the next thing, and the next, and the next, hoping to recreate the first spark. But sparks don't repeat. They flicker, then they're gone. And here's the truth we rarely say out loud. The pursuit of pleasure can become exhausting, not because pleasure is wrong, but because we've forgotten how to rest in enough. We live in a world that sells pleasure as the answer. Click this, watch this, eat this, swipe here, you'll feel better. And for a moment we do, but deep down we know it's not working, because what we're really craving isn't more pleasure, it's more presence. It's not the dessert we want, it's the feeling of being cared for. It's not the notification, it's the sense that someone sees us. It's not the kiss, it's the safety beneath it. Pleasure and happiness, two words we often confuse, but they are not the same. Pleasure is a moment, sharp, sweet, gone in an instant. Happiness is quieter. It doesn't scream, it stays. You can be surrounded by pleasure and still feel hollow. And you can be standing in pain, yet somehow feel whole. The ancient world understood this difference. In a Sufi parable, a man asked a wise teacher, "Why does pleasure fade so quickly?" The teacher smiled, "Because it comes from the outside, and what comes from outside must return there." But happiness, he said, is like a well within the earth. It takes time to dig, but once you reach it, it flows forever. Pleasure is often passive. It happens to you. Happiness, real happiness, requires your participation. In Buddhist philosophy, they speak of dukkha, the unavoidable dissatisfaction that follows any craving. You eat the cake, but you want another slice. You fall in love, but fear losing them. Pleasure invites attachment, and attachment invites suffering. But happiness, or what the Buddha called sukha, is deeper. It arises when you stop clinging, when you are fully here, fully open, with nothing to hold or fear, not high, not low, just present. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, "There is a kind of joy that seems bitter at first, but ends in peace, and there is a joy that feels sweet at first, but turns to bitterness in the end." That is the test. Not how pleasure begins, but what it leaves behind. Pleasure is like sugar. Happiness is like bread. One gives a rush, the other sustains. Even modern psychology agrees. Dopamine, the pleasure chemical, spikes and crashes, but serotonin, the contentment chemical, builds slowly over time through connection, purpose, movement, stillness. We were not meant to live in constant highs. Our souls are not built for overstimulation. They crave rhythm, meaning, ground. And maybe that's what happiness really is. Not the presence of pleasure, but the absence of inner conflict. when we are at peace with ourselves, with the world, and with our place in it. There's a Zen story of a man who lived a very simple life. Every morning he swept his porch, fed the birds, made tea. When asked if he was happy, he said, "I don't think about happiness. I just try to notice when the wind changes and not fight it." Happiness doesn't need to be loud. It can look like stillness, gratitude, a moment when nothing is missing. So the question is not, what brings you pleasure, but what stays when pleasure fades? What makes you feel safe in the silence? What do you return to when the high is gone and the world is quiet? Pleasure is a spark. Happiness is the fire you tend when no one's watching. Both matter, but only one can carry you through the dark. The connection of pleasure and pain. We're taught to keep them separate, one to run toward, the other to run from. One we crave, the other we fear. But what if they're not enemies? What if they're two hands of the same body? In life, the deepest joys often come wrapped in sorrow. The first cry of a newborn follows hours of pain. The beauty of love carries the weight of loss. Laughter at a funeral feels like betrayal, but it's not. It's survival. Pain and pleasure are not opposites. They are twins, born from the same source, feeling. To feel deeply is to risk both, and to shut one out is to numb them both. There's an old Japanese saying, "The soul would have no rainbow if the eyes had no tears." Pleasure, without the contrast of pain, becomes invisible. It's only after the storm that sunlight feels warm again. It's only when your heart has been broken that a kind word can bring you to tears. In Stoic philosophy, suffering was not something to avoid, but something to befriend. Epictetus wrote, "Difficulties show a person's character, and pleasure reveals their temptations." They believed that pain refines us, while unchecked pleasure can undo us. The ancient Persians told the story of a man who asked the gods to never feel pain again. They granted his wish. For a time he laughed, danced, lived without fear. But slowly, his laughter felt hollow. Food lost its taste. He could no longer cry, and without tears, even joy had no meaning. Eventually, he begged for pain to return, so that he could feel alive again. Pain deepens us. It sharpens the soul the way friction sharpens a blade. It breaks open the heart, not to destroy it, but to make room for more. And pleasure, when it arrives after pain, feels like grace, like breath returning to lungs, like warmth after cold. It's not loud, it's sacred. Even in the body, pleasure and pain overlap. The nerves that process both are tangled. The same place in the brain lights up when we feel heartbreak and when we feel warmth. The line is not as clean as we'd like to believe. Think about the last time you cried from joy, or laughed through tears, or touched someone after a long absence and felt both comfort and grief rise up at once. That's the truth we forget. Pleasure and pain are not at war. They're in conversation. The deeper you allow yourself to hurt, the more deeply you can love. The more you accept discomfort, the more you open yourself to wonder. So maybe the goal isn't to avoid pain, maybe it's to hold both experiences with open hands, to say yes, not just to the pleasure, but to the ache that makes the pleasure matter. Because without pain, there is no story, no healing, no joy with depth. Rumi said, "Don't turn away. Keep your gaze on the bandaged place. That's where the light enters you. So let the pain shape you. Let the pleasure soften you. Let them dance together, not as enemies, but as teachers. And maybe, when we stop separating them, we begin to live more honestly, more openly. Let's summarize all ideas. We've tasted the sweetness of pleasure. We've seen how quickly it fades. We've walked through the silence it leaves behind. We've touched the space where happiness begins, and we've felt the ache that gives joy its shape. And now, maybe we understand. Pleasure isn't the enemy, but it's not the destination either. It's a glimpse, a flicker, a doorway into something deeper, if we're willing to look beyond the surface. We were never meant to numb ourselves with pleasure. We were meant to feel, to open, to live with our whole hearts, even when it hurts. There's a kind of beauty that doesn't depend on the next high. And maybe the most radical thing we can do in a world obsessed with more is to say, this is enough, this breath, this moment, this silence. Because once you stop chasing, you start receiving. And what you receive isn't always pleasure, but sometimes something even better, peace. And peace is what remains when the craving ends, when you're not running, when you're not hungry for something else. Just here. There's an old Zen teaching that says, when walking, walk. When eating, eat. When sitting, sit. That's it. Simple, but revolutionary. In a world that always tells us to reach for the next thing. You don't have to abandon pleasure. You don't have to run from pain. You just have to be awake enough to know which is speaking to you and why. In the end, maybe the goal isn't to avoid suffering or to collect constant joy, but to live deeply, to feel fully, to let life move through you without resistance. Pleasure will come, so will pain. But you can stay steady, you can stay present, and in that presence, you might just find something better than happiness. You might find yourself. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more deep content. We cover philosophies of life,